All right, it's your boy Spank Dog, aka Puffinstein, at YouTube. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Let's get into it. All right, so we're gonna get into some creepy stories.
In this first creepy internet mystery, who is the silent man and what are his intentions? Needless to say, there are definitely some very interesting people in this world, and one of them happens to be located over in the United Kingdom. There is an individual who has been standing in the way of traffic for over 7 years in the exact same spot, and nobody knows why. He is being called the silent man. He does not utter a single word and only stands in the middle of traffic. This action has caused several traffic jams on the roads of Swansea, as reported by Metro UK. This individual's name is David Hanson, and like I said, he has always been found at the exact same spot for over 7 years. Why I'm saying over 7 years happens to be because the article I'm reading from was published back in 2021, and back then, David was 51 years old. What happens to be pretty interesting is that nobody knows the motive behind his actions or why he does.
That's wild. He's been standing in the same spot for 7 years.
For example, in 2017, he was arrested and sentenced to 3 years, and yet he refused to say anything in his defense. And in 2020, upon his release, David would once again block the road at the same exact spot outside the Swansea Central Police Station. And once again, he would find himself under arrest, but this time facing criminal charges.
I wonder what's going on. This is why I like these stories, because they give you a little more, like, it's just a little more interesting.
He has not once voiced his concern or the rationale behind doing the same thing every few months, so nobody knows what exactly his motivation behind this is. However, the police have confirmed that he can talk, but refuses to do so out of his own will. Moreover, he is not being described as a polite man. According to this article, David has been arrested and sent to jail 9 times, and every time he refuses to explain himself. The judge says that he wants to help David Thompson, not punish him, but given the fact that every time he's released, he blocks the road, he may just spend the rest of his life in prison or in some facility to address his problematic behavior.
Yeah, come on. He has mental health issues. If he doesn't want to commit himself, in some instances, they can't commit him. You know what I mean?
And the issues lying beneath. However, they are not sure if he even wants to be helped. One may think that he's just ignoring the police officers or the investigators or the judge, but when he goes to block the road, he doesn't even pay attention or talk to disgruntled drivers. When he was in his jail cell, he refused to even talk to his cellmates. David was also known to have once barricaded himself inside his prison cell and set his bed on fire and sat there silently until officers managed to get in and drag him to safety. Now, I'm trying to figure.
Yeah, man. I have compassion for the man, you know what I'm saying? But, when you get locked up, that's another thing that people, you want to definitely stay out of jail, because, they don't put everybody that has mental health problems in mental institution. So you could be locked up with somebody that talks to themselves, all that.
Out how they know he is not a mute or can speak, as the article suggests. At a past trial in Crown Court, it was decided that he was mute of malice, that he was able to speak, but decides not to, rather than mute by visitation of God, meaning that he cannot.
There's people that choose not to speak and they don't ever talk. That's why they have a title for it, mute of malice.
Speak. Looking into this further, apparently he's been doing things like this since 2015. Reading this article from Wales Online back in 2015, he once draped himself on the bonnet of a Royal Mail Post Office van with his face pressed up against the windscreen and refused to get off, and of course not speaking at all. In turn, absolutely terrifying the driver. Another time, he stood in traffic, standing in front of a car holding on to its grill, not uttering a single word. And again, why does he do this? Nobody knows. There is a theory that he has better lodgings in prison than out of it. I mean, I'm sure it's warm, he gets a bed, and he does get fed.
That's not necessarily true. Well, in Great Britain, it's probably more likely than in the U.S. because you got jails like Parchman. And if he would have landed in Parchman in the United States, I don't think he would have done it for lodge. When they say lodge, they mean room and board. You know, you don't go to Parchment for room and board. You don't go to Parchment for 3 hots and a cot.
Theory was actually backed up by David's brother himself, as he would go on to state that David would deliberately get himself locked up in order to get free meals and a roof over his head. David's brother goes on to state that he believes this is all a scheme. There's no protest going on here. He just likes the prison life better. And maybe that is indeed the best answer here. I mean, the road he's choosing to block is right next to the police station, but doctors still to this day are completely baffled by his silence and why he refuses to talk. David Thompson is still blocking the middle of the road outside the Swansea Central Police Station as recent as April 8th, 2025. Two officers escorted him off the road and warned him that if he repeated the behavior, he would be arrested. Well, he did, and he was arrested again. So is this just the case of a man who likes the lodgings of a prison cell? But if that was the case, why would he then go ahead and light it on fire?
But still, to spend like all of your day not talking for years straight, there's definitely something not, you know. I mean, who's the person to say if a person's right or not? Everybody got their problems. The average person needs companionship. I would say 99.99999% of the people can't do what he's doing as far as not communicating with anybody.
Fully know until David himself decides to speak. This next creepy internet mystery has to do with the strange case of Karen Catherine Walgrave. In 2011, something bizarre happened on Facebook. People were made aware of hundreds of unnerving messages that were posted by a Canadian woman named Karen Catherine Walgrave. Her messages read like somebody who is deep into conspiracy theories. However, it wasn't what she was saying that was unnerving so many people, but it was the fact that she was actually having a conversation with herself. There were anywhere between 500 to 700 cryptic replies within a 12-hour period, and soon after the messages had stopped and were removed, Karen's Facebook account went with it. It was also removed, leaving behind questions and the mystery of what happened to Karen Catherine Walgrave. Her messages read like somebody who is deep into conspiracy theories. However, it wasn't what she was saying that was unnerving so many people, but it was the fact that she was actually having a conversation with herself. There were anywhere between 500 to 700 cryptic replies within a 12-hour period, and soon after the messages had stopped and were removed, Karen's Facebook account went with it. It was also removed, leaving behind questions and the mystery of what happened to Karen Catherine Walgrave. According to her Facebook profile, Karen was born in London and studied at the University of Toronto, Canada, where she would earn a PhD. Also, according to her profile, she is well-traveled and spoke several different languages, including French, Estonian, Latvian, English, Russian, Gaelic, Latin, and German. Proof of this was oftentimes seen in her multi-language replies to herself. However, most of her posts were in English and read like chopped sentences. This right here is an example of what's considered to be one of Karen's normal posts, where she is seen asking, "This picture is the best I can do." And then in the same exact post, she seems to reply to herself, "No, it is not. I am better now." This would be an example of Karen's more incoherent post, where she would go on to say, "Glad Alexar is back." Then she would reply to herself, "That Trask is actually heterosexual is not certain. He is wired to George Blake through his early passports, quote unquote, gate ports." Then continue to reply to herself by saying or asking, "Indrik's birthday, 16 May, smiley face." What in the world is going on here? I might just have a theory, but let's go ahead and continue. These coherent and incoherent posts that were made by Karen, or whoever was responsible for creating this account, were only made a day apart. It was because of the differences between these texts in such a short period of time that many people online began to question the woman's sanity. The word schizophrenic appeared alongside the link to her Facebook profile in many online forums. Soon more posts were uncovered and shared among many people. In her profile, there were only a handful of personal images Karen uploaded, and strangely enough, they all displayed signs of film damage, like this image right here. This image was uploaded on July 13th, 2010, and a day later, she would go ahead and leave comments like, "Slings of outrageous fortune, never mind the Avro arrow, I guess. This is my husband's idea of cleaning ice flow, our cottage, February 1995. And finally, she would leave a comment saying, "As you can see, someone near destroyed the pic."
She's married, apparently. She's talking about her husband. "This is my husband's idea of clearing ice flow, our cottage." I mean, she's You know, nobody knows for sure if she has a husband.
Now, it's always very possible that Karen suffered with schizophrenia or some kind of other mental illness, but I really have to say, this is really giving off Silent Hill 2 vibes. This is another image she would post where it looks like it's covered in burn marks, and she would leave a comment by saying, "This is my best imitation of British police at her cottage."
For those of you who don't know, Silent Hill is a video game that they made into a movie, the horror genre. The movie's pretty good. The game's good too. It's classic. It's got a cult following. But Silent Hill, the video game, it's one of those games that you get lost and you'll run around forever.
These photos look like they were taken with a Polaroid, and as you can see, they are just littered with burn marks. While Karen's posts were anywhere between coherent and incoherent, they were mainly innocent until she began to mention the FBI and the CIA on her post, talking about being controlled and monitored by them, the Men in Black. She also mentioned the illegal and perverse doings of the elite and how she knows several international criminal networks. This is where more of her posts would become more cryptic and fall into what would be considered the conspiratorial realm. For example, she would go ahead and post this block of text and reply this block of text all within the same minute. She would go on to say that, "By the way, it should be made clear that I am officially still enrolled in my PhD, History International Relations program, because there was never a thesis proposal submitted by me to any committee on the basis of which they could have failed, F me as they did, in kangaroo-style court, moving to organize a Waco, Texas type siege of my properties." And again, she would go ahead and reply this to herself all within the same minute. She would go ahead and reply with, "Apart from electronic assault through the ATM system and otherwise, extorting money increasingly on Highway 401, also through baseless pullover with police cars, speeding away at 160 kilometers an hour after attempting to give me traffic tickets for driving at 105 kilometers an hour in the 100 kilometer hour zone on the highway. Do I drive fast occasionally? They all do, including police. They have not read it, I have not written it, and there was nothing to discuss or declare other than their ugly death threat of Holocaust to me and my objections. Also my objections to being marginalized and my life ended for my English assets and heritage, for a permanent handover after 1942 to this criminally internationally organized pervert network." And this is how most of her posts ended up being, where there was just post after post.
I mean, it sounds like just ramblings. You don't know if they're ramblings. Like I said, everything seems like she's having issues with her mental health. But like I said, if you don't know the lady, you have no idea what she's talking about.
After post of very cryptic messages where it seemed like she was speaking about something very sinister, all within the same minute or a minute apart of one another. This is where people began to theorize that this was no longer a woman suffering with schizophrenia, but perhaps maybe a script or some kind of program that connects to Facebook and is testing automated posts. Think of something like the dead internet theory.
Wow.
Some people do not buy that theory, as they do believe that throughout her incoherent text, there does appear to be some form of structure to her message and conversations, and she's purposely leaving a hidden message for us to decipher. Another idea is that Karen...
I didn't think he was going to go there with it. You know what I mean? I didn't see that coming.
Karen Catherine Walgrave's Facebook account could have been a modern spy communication log, some sort of social networking number station that can only be deciphered by traveling spies. But many other people do believe that she was an extremely intelligent person who snapped and began an online diary of her mental demise.
People started to think it was a woman who her mental health started to deteriorate.
But in any case, she has never been seen or heard from again. In this next creepy internet mystery, who was driving this car? On October 10, 2005, a car had ran through a red light in Mesa, Arizona, and was clearly photographed doing so by the traffic camera system. The Mesa Police Department issued a ticket, including the photo of the car committing the crime in question, to the offender James Hamburg, who was seen driving the car along with his wife Lorraine. There was only one small tiny problem in the fact that James Hamburg, the person police said was driving the car that went through the red light, was no longer alive and hadn't been since the year 2000. So for 5 years, James Hamburg was deceased. Now, it's kind of difficult to tell whether or not James was actually driving the vehicle. Here is a photograph of them for reference, but you can clearly tell that is Lorraine in the passenger side.
Mhm.
So maybe somebody was driving Lorraine around town, and police, they were not aware that James had passed away. The only problem with that is when Lorraine saw the ticket and the photograph, she was absolutely floored. She took a look at the photograph. She said, that's her husband, that's her, that's their car. But it would be impossible for it to be them because, for one, her husband was deceased, and two, and this was confirmed by police, that the 80-year-old Lorraine was home at the time recovering from heart surgery. Lorraine was so frantic upon seeing this ticket, which had the date of October 10th, 2005, showing Lorraine and her husband driving a car that she knows she was not driving, that she would go ahead and call her son, Steven, who was a retired firefighter. She would tell Steven, I don't know if this is a cruel joke or what, before receiving the further boggling news that Steven's wife had been driving the car on October 10th and was nowhere near this location. Thus, the family was certain of the whereabouts of Lorraine, James, and the car, so the picture should have been totally impossible. Lorraine's son would try to take some control of the situation, and he would explain the situation to Terry Dorn, a detective, but she refused to drop the anomalous ticket until Hamburg had offered conclusive proof that his father was indeed deceased. Thus, Hamburg faxed the detective his father's death certificate, but apparently heard nothing more of it. Presumably confused and frustrated, Hamburg next contacted the press, and when the press spoke to the police again, Sergeant Chuck Trapani insisted that Dorn had never received the death certificate that Stephen certainly sent. Eventually, the police did some digging themselves, found that James Hamburg was, in fact, most definitely deceased. Police had also thought that maybe there was a technical error with the camera, that the picture that's being shown was much older than what's being reported. But they did take a look at the buildings in the background, and they did confirm that those buildings were built very recently, that year. The police had also stated that archived tickets are destroyed by the Mesa Traffic Department after 3 years. And remember, James, he passed away 5 years ago. Sergeant Trapani was quoted as saying, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that the car was driven through the light on October 10th. He thinks that someone must have taken Lorraine Hamburg out for a drive, and that someone must have bore a suspicious resemblance to her late husband. But again, that seems unlikely because Lorraine Hamburg was confirmed to have had heart surgery at the time, and again, resting at home. Others who were invested in this story thought that James may have had a twin brother or something like that, but Phoenix News Times had gotten involved, and they stated that James did not have a brother at all, twin or not. So the question happens to be, who was driving the car? Was it a vision from the past, a ghost and a doppelganger, or some kind of glitch in the matrix? Lorraine did go ahead and say that they have the right people, they just had the wrong time. What I happen to find to be eerie too is that it seems like there's other faces in the car as well, and everybody seems to be oddly staring at the traffic camera. This next creepy internet mystery involves the WKTV hijacking. On September 28th, 2016, at around 6:17 p.m. Eastern,
I've never heard about this
time in New York, while many people were home watching WKTV news, an emergency alert broadcast populated across their screen.
What does that mean? What's weird about that?
This riddle, would you, could you, on a train, was in reference to Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham, but people who were watching this news segment at this time had no idea why this riddle was included with this emergency alert. People continued to watch WKTV news like normal, but later on that day, WKTV riddle, would you, could you, on a train was in reference to Dr. Seuss. People who were watching this news segment at this time had no idea why this riddle was included with this emergency alert. People continued to watch WKTV news like normal, but later on that day, WKTV would issue an apology by saying, if you were watching our 6 p.m. broadcast, you saw a hazardous materials warning message. There is no such warning. It was a technical error. So according to WKTV, there wasn't even a hazardous materials warning either. It was just
Somebody must have hacked the system.
One giant weird glitch. But they would also go ahead later on that night publish a brief article by saying the message was an automated test which was not intended for public display. This message originated from FEMA as a test and had the national location code in it. Tests should not have that code as it is automatically retransmitted. We have contacted New York State Broadcasters Association, who administers the emergency alert system in New York. We are working with FEMA to resolve this. Our apologies for the confusion this may have caused. But this is where things get even more bizarre, because not long after that article was published, FEMA replied by saying they did not send this out. They will launch a full investigation into how their codes were hacked. WKTV seems to be the only target of this hack.
See, I said hack. Also, there's something suspect about it because it sounded like he was going to say they're going to deny that they were hacked.
And not too long after this, another emergency alert went out that included a riddle involving a train. WKTV, they had to come back out and state that another warning message was sent out in error at 10:38 p.m. Again, this is no emergency. So once again, they had to apologize. And so that was that. The news station, they gave their apology. Anybody watching this segment, they moved on. They really did not give this much thought until the very next day.
I traded my evening wine for evening with mood.
Stop buying wine if you're just going to throw it.
Now I'm able to get a good night's rest and wake up refreshed with zero hangover.
On September 29th, a Pascack Valley Line train number 1614 left the Spring Valley station in Spring Valley, New York at around 7:23 a.m. Eastern Time, bound for Hoboken, New Jersey. Everything for the train had been running as normal until it entered the Hoboken terminal at around 8:45 a.m. The train sped up, going over the bumper block and through the rail concourse, coming to a rest at the wall right before the station's waiting area. The train had unfortunately crashed. One witness had confirmed that the train never slowed down as it entered the station, which was located at the end of the line. The train was not equipped with an automatic brake system, which is used if the engineer does not slow the train down in time. The train crash resulted in one person losing their life and 114 other people injured. The one person that did lose their life, Fabiola Batard de Kroon, was not on the train but actually standing on the platform when she lost her life to falling debris. Those who had watched WKTV News in New York just hours before the train crash were left confused as to why they were given these riddles of this train, and then hours later, a train leaving New York to New Jersey just happens to crash. Although he was injured, the train engineer cooperated with the investigation. Both the train engineer and the conductor were interviewed by investigators. The engineer lacked any memory of the accident itself. According to federal investigators, the engineer felt well rested and was unaware of any mechanical problems in the moments prior to the accident. Interestingly enough, and as coincidence may have it, the black boxes could not be recovered. On February 16, 2018, the NTSB released their probable cause of the accident. The NTSB determined that the engineer's failure to stop was caused by fatigue due to undiagnosed sleep apnea. Also contributing to the accident was New Jersey Transit's failure to follow their internal sleep apnea screening guidance to find at-risk workers and refer them for testing and treatment. New Jersey Transit failed to identify end-of-track collisions as a hazard despite numerous previous accidents. Additionally, the FRA was cited for their failure to require railroad to screen safety-critical workers for sleep disorders. So they go ahead and blame sleep apnea, but back in December of 2013, there was also a similar train accident where a train derailed, and they blamed sleep apnea. There were also similar train derailments that occurred back in 2011.
See, that's a little weird.
In 2016, where the causes were attributed to sleep apnea as well. But when it came to that very mysterious emergency alert broadcast that seemed to have foreshadowed this train crash, there are still no answers as to what caused that message.
All right, guys. The guy who doesn't talk, that's definitely interesting because it's not often that you hear somebody hasn't said a word to anybody in 7 or 8 years. You know what I'm saying? The couple, they spotted the couple in the car. They still can't figure out if anybody was driving the car or not. The end, the train crash, I didn't understand that they were saying that the emergency broadcast alert was related to, well, not related, was some sort of like heads up about the train crash. Must have missed something while I was watching it. Remember, usually I watch them first and then I'll watch them with you guys. Listen, man, and I hope you guys like the background. I did that on purpose since we were switching it up and doing something a little creepy. So it's your boy Spank Dog. I'm out of here. Much love. Peace.